All right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about Meg 2, The Trench, which, you've probably heard me say before on the show, I was not a big fan of the first Meg movie, but I loved this sequel so much. It's one of my most fun experiences at the movie theaters this year. I went to see it with my mom in 4DX, and we just had a blast. And I even went back and rewatched the Meg afterwards, and I gotta say I was a little hard on it, but we'll talk about that a little more during the conversation with my guest, Emma Sewell, who is actually such a big Meg fan. She's seen the movie like 300 something times, which is amazing. But we'll get into that as we get into the conversation. And before we get to that, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on social media at Piecing Pod and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. And with that said, we got a lot of crazy shit to get into. So let's start talking about Meg 2, The Trench. All right, we are going to talk Meg 2, The Trench, and I am so excited to talk about this one because I know critically maybe, hasn't been received as well as some of the people behind this movie were hoping, but I think people who wanted to like this movie loved it. Me and my mom loved it, and my guest here, Emma Sewell, is somebody who really loved it. Emma, welcome to Piecing It Together.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. When I saw your tweet that you had seen the first Meg over 100 times and this one already 5 times, where are you up to now at this point? Because that was like a couple weeks ago.
Well, so it was just a happy coincidence that when the trailer came out, I was like, "Ooh, how many days? I'll start a countdown." And if I watched the original film every day until the new one was released, I would do 300 watches of the first one and then be able to the next day go and see The Trench. So that is what I did. So I'm up to like 306 now on the original Meg.
That's amazing.
Only 6 on The Trench at the cinema though.
Okay. That's a regular amount, I would say, for sure. But I'm sure we're going to get into, what it is you like so much about these silly movies along the way. But first, it is your first time on the show. So why don't you tell my listeners a little about you and what you do?
Sure. So, film has always been in my life. I grew up on sort of the old awful comedies like Carry On films and Abbott and Costello and creature features, which has not left me at all, obviously.
Yeah.
It was always just a hobby until 5-6 years ago. I was like, you know what? Let's start doing this thing a bit properly. So I am sort of part-time movie reviewer now. I've got my blog going where I do reviews. Been lucky enough to go to the London Film Festival. Got that all booked up for this year again. And I've joined the Flickering Dreams podcast where we just cover new releases and, pick a director to talk about our favourite films of their backlist. So, yeah.
Awesome stuff. Absolutely. My mom, who I went to see this movie with, and she just had an absolute blast. We saw it in 4DX and she was just like screaming as the seats were shaking and the water was splashing. But she loves to tell people that when she was pregnant with me, she took me to the world's worst film festival. And that
Sounds
was,
amazing.
oh yeah, I'm sure all those movies were incredible, Ed Wood and all that kind of stuff. And I think this series and this movie specifically, the second one, because I feel like, I had told you that I wasn't the biggest fan of the Meg, but I did revisit it after loving Meg 2 so much, and I found it to be a lot more fun than I think I gave it credit for the first time. But this one really leans in, and this is for fans of silly, over-the-top movies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more with you.
Yeah. So, with that said, I feel like we'll get into like what works and what maybe doesn't. Although honestly, I had such fun with this movie. I don't know anything. Screw anything that doesn't work. But we'll get to all that along the way. Let's just start jumping into puzzle pieces. What do you have for your first one?
So, two major obvious ones. I'm going to go with the slightly less obvious one, and that's Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously, big dinosaur popping up in a lot of the
Sure.
scenes, which actually it is actually the beginning of the first Meg book. That
Mm-hmm.
like the opening scene to this film is the beginning of the last book, and I was a bit upset it wasn't in the first film. But obviously, you
Mm-hmm.
get the T Rex with the iconic roaring, and then later in the film, you've got I've forgotten all the character names. It's just gone out of
Yeah,
my
I
head.
know Jonas. That's the only one I remember. Is Jonas and the
um,
Meg. I know the Meg is the Meg. So
the essentials is fine.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, when they're obviously trying to get the helicopter, and the uncle is having a fight with one of the sort of crocodile monsters, and
Hmm.
you get all of the other ones running at him through the tall grass, and
Sure.
you could just see them, and he's running off, and I was just like, oh my god, that is that Jurassic Park. There we go.
Yeah.
Um, just lots of that, and then you get the where again it's the uncle. He gets into the very small enclosure for the very large creature,
Sure.
um, to do a couple of tricks, and that feels very much like raptor fences in
Hmm.
Jurassic World, and the T Rex confined in the first one, and just like although I know some of the bits, as I say, are in the actual novelization, I think they've obviously leaned heavy into the aesthetics of Jurassic Park just for a lot of things.
Yeah,
Um, on
absolutely. I had the
that.
Jurassic movies on my list as well. Like, I think there's other areas too that we could connect them. The fact that the uncle he thinks that he's trained one of these things. That's total Chris Pratt and the Raptors.
Yeah.
There's also Jason Statham needing to go repair the auxiliary power or whatever so they can survive. Which, by the way, amazing that he's like able to swim like thousands of feet down below the ocean with no suit on. Just incredible stuff there.
I'm going to put
But
that down to science in inverted
yes.
commas that I know nothing about, so I'm happy to believe that would be able to happen.
I love that line that like you don't see fish exploding from the pressure. Like, sure, that explains it. Absolutely. Yeah, great stuff all around. But yeah, lots of parallels could be made to both Jurassic Park and the Jurassic World movies. And I think this movie is, a lot more fun than the Jurassic World movies. I mean, nothing beats the first Jurassic Park. Like that is just it's both creature feature and a genuinely great movie.
Mm.
But this, I think as far as like silliness and over the topness and all that, like it definitely beats the world movies. But before I go to another puzzle piece, you brought up the novels. Have you read all of the Meg novels?
Um, I have only read the first one.
Okay.
Um, I am awful for this because I'm like, oh yeah, it's based on a book, and I buy the book, and then I don't get time to read it before I
I
see
do
the
the same
film.
thing.
But
Yeah.
but this is actually so this one is much more like the first book in that
Okay.
there's sort of this Sea World type center,
Hmm.
and a lot of the action is based around that and what they're doing. So um, I'm assuming they went, well, we need to make this film and we need to make people like it, so it should be a lot more random, like just
Sure.
actiony. And
Yeah.
then they've gone back to this one and like, all right, okay, we can take some of the good bits out of the first
Yeah.
book and merge it in.
For sure, for sure. I saw an article that said the third book in the series is just the craziest, most ridiculous one. So hopefully that's where we're headed if the Meg 3 happens, because I want to see how nuts they can
When
make this thing.
when
When?
the Meg 3, positive
Abs.
thinking, get it out into the
Yes.
world.
Absolutely. Well, just as a quick tangent, I mean, this movie it did off of 130 million budget. It did 61 million here in the US and Canada, but 204 million everywhere else, and a total of 265 so far,
Nice.
just off a couple of weeks. So, I mean, obviously, the world is behind us here and is going to help fund the next Meg movie. So, thank you to the rest of the world. But speaking of that, I am going to go with the Fast and Furious series for my first
Ooh.
puzzle piece here, specifically because of that. This movie is absolutely playing to a world stage. It is going for a specific kind of audience who loves this kind of stuff. And that is exactly how the Fast and Furious movies have stayed afloat, even as, critically, maybe, as far as like pop culture wise, like people have kind of gotten sick of them, it seems like, here in America. But at the same time, these movies keep making money overseas, and people love just how over the top and crazy they get. You could, of course, also, Hobbs and Shaw, like, any of Jason Statham's like stuff going on in the Fast and Furious movies. He's basically that same character here with Jonas in, in Meg 2. And let's be honest, he's basically that character in most movies he does. But, he's definitely, though, drawing on just how awesome, Jason Statham, the presence is in these kinds of movies. And so you've got this guy who can basically do anything, but he's also kind of a screw up, and he wants everybody to leave him alone until they talk him into it. They get him with that one little thing, whether it's, the niece or the ex-wife or, whatever it is they can drag him back in with. And maybe that goes a little to both the Meg and Meg 2, but the Fast and Furious movies are something that I feel like these movies are going to keep up in the ante when we get the Meg 3, and like they're just going to get more and more over the top, and that's exactly the trajectory that the Fast and Furious franchise has gone on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, after the first Meg, it was clear they were like big monster, big action. That's what we want. And this time, I think they did lean heavy into a lot more a widespread sort of action. So you got action on land, in
Mm-hmm.
the sea,
Mm-hmm.
on boats, on skidoos. Just let's just throw more action in everywhere. Get more of it in,
Exactly.
and it gets more ridiculous, like you say, underwater. Sure, you don't need breathing apparatus; it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think we're one step away. The Meg in space, I can see
Oh,
it. The Meg 5 in
yeah.
space. Yeah, I'm all there for it.
There's a very thin line between underwater movies and outer space movies. So, like, and that'll actually factor into some of my puzzle pieces. But, like, definitely the Meg could easily go to space. By the way, Jason Statham stabbing a Meg with a helicopter propeller. That thing is hundreds of pounds, probably.
I I was sitting there in the first time I watched it, and I was like, I love it, I love it. Emma, don't think about the fact he would not be able to lift that, especially out of the water.
Uh,
Like the end of it was fully submerged. No.
just do not think and watch the
Oh
movie and
man.
enjoy it for what it is. Let's go to another puzzle piece. What do you have next?
Sure. Oh, which one to pick? I'm going to pick Rush Hour, like
Oh,
the three
nice.
films. So Wu Yin, I'm terrible with pronunciation of names. Gentleman who played the uncle is actually a really big actor in China.
Mm.
I thought he was great on screen. Really good
Oh, yeah.
chemistry with the other actors and stuff. He very clearly has that Jackie Chan vibe about him, which I love. And the scene I mentioned, Jurassic Park esque, where he's running through the long grass. The fight he has before that with the spade that breaks in half, and he's just doing random stuff. And I was just the callback to watching Rush Hour and like that very animated, comical sort of fighting style. I think it was obviously really suited with giant CGI'd creatures and stuff, but um, the mannerisms, it just lightens everything up because I think with these films, and people will go, it absolutely does that, but I'm going to say they sometimes can be a little too serious for their own liking. And a lot of people have said to me, it's too serious. But I was like, it's not serious at all. They all
Hmm.
know what they're in, and it's fantastic. And I think that comedic style of action really just helps it all along. I mean, there's when he has got the bomb at the end, he's jumping out of the helicopter and
Yeah.
he sort of fumbles it and it accidentally turns on, and he has that moment of panic where he's trying to switch it back off. Just made me chuckle so much. And again, just Jackie Chan fighting with all those like Chinese artifacts in the
Right.
like convention center thing. I just loved watching him doing that sort of slightly more slapstick comedy. So I think, it's clear that a lot of action stars take um you know take a lead from the original action stars.
Sure.
And it's just nice to see, and I think it just works really well in this setting.
Absolutely. I think that guy is a big part of what makes this one work even more for me
Mm.
than the first one did because, like you're saying, like some of that slapsticky action stuff. I mean, some people have complained about Meg 2 is like there's not enough shark. And it's like, yeah, it's a shark movie, but I'm there for a big over the top action movie with some monsters in it and some just crazy shit. And he absolutely gives me that big over the top action movie. So does Jason Statham. Like everybody is on that same page of like, let's just make this crazy. It's not just a shark movie. You want a shark movie? Go watch Jaws. I mean, Jaws, of course, can come up here as a puzzle piece, but like, watch Jaws. It already exists, Like, this is meant to be a crazy over the top movie. I think that's what drew Ben Wheatley to it, who I don't know if you're a fan of his, but like I'm generally not a big fan of Ben Wheatley's, but I think the idea of getting to make this crazy over the top film is what drew him to this franchise.
Mm. Yeah, I'm sort of on the fence.
Hmm.
Perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I'm just glad that it didn't like have a massive effect on how the final products came out. I was still invested. It was still what I loved about the first one and taking it to another level.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that really sat well with me. So I'm glad he was on board for that reason.
Yeah, for sure. I will go for another piece here. And this was one that when I first saw the trailer, I was like, please let it be a movie where I can use this as a puzzle piece. And I think I can, and that makes me happy. It's Piranha 3D,
Oh,
which
yes, it's on my list.
nice, awesome. Piranha 3D is the best possible version of, oh, they're making a new Piranha movie. Hell yeah, let's go. That is like a movie that understood exactly what we want out of these movies. And the director Alexander Ahad, he like just was totally on board with what the point of a big silly monster movie like this is, a creature feature. And its sequel 3DD or 3 double D, whatever you want to call it, didn't quite it tipped the scales. It went a little too silly, whereas 3D balances it perfectly. It's exactly the violence, it's exactly the comedy, it's exactly the creature stuff, and I feel like this one did that well. Of course, this isn't like a hard R-rated, super gory movie. It's just more about the action, so it's different in that way. But yeah, I'm glad you had Piranha 3D on your list as well.
Yeah, it's probably I mean, basically the bottom of my list is every shark movie ever made.
Sure, sure.
And then just a long list of things like, oh, I saw that.
Hmm.
But that was one of the big ones, and I was like, yeah, it's absolutely sort of on the same level, like you say. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's go to another one. What do you have for another one?
Right, I'm gonna skip over the shark ones and go to another action franchise, and that is Die Hard.
Okay.
Obviously, like Die Hard with sharks,
Yeah.
pretty self-explanatory. I think there are two points in it that very much made me just think, oh, this is in that franchise. It has to be. We can put the Meg 2 in it instead of 5 in that series.
Mm,
That's fine, absolutely fine.
sure.
Um, you get uh, the villain, uh, our random villain who I never really feel like you properly meet him,
Right.
and yet
He's just there.
you do get the backstory, but he just pops up everywhere, and that's a very die-hard thing. You think they're dead, they come back.
Yeah.
You're in a completely different place. Look, there's a villain again, and just everywhere. And I'm just like, how is this man still alive?
Yeah.
At this point, and very much like you get at the end. Obviously, he's trying to get Jonas, and at that point, I'm like, this is where the villain logic goes out the window. So
Yeah.
his girlfriend has been eaten by the Meg. He wants to kill Jason Statham. Fine. But Jason Statham wants to kill the shark that ate your girlfriend. So why not kill the shark and then kill Jason Statham whilst he's killing the shark? I mean, there's very much villain logic there.
Yeah.
But whatever. But then you get and I mean, you could probably line them up against each other and go, this is the same scene. And that was when at the final sort of battle, he's walking down the pier with Jonas swimming underneath it, trying to avoid the bullets
Yeah.
that he's shooting through. And I was like, this is exactly the boardroom scene in the first film. And I just loved it. It's like there were lots of little sort of nods to a lot of action films in there, and you can definitely see where they'd come from. But I think that was probably my favorite little collection of them.
Absolutely. I love, like, so far during this conversation, we have the Fast and Furious movies, we have the Rush Hour movies, and we have the Die Hard movies, which kind of shows that this is just as much like your B action movie, like, you know, that kind of over the top as it is creature feature over the top. It like it kind of throws them all together, and that's what's so much fun about it, I think. But yeah, great one there to include. I love that. I'm gonna go with Alien for my next puzzle piece. I said earlier, like, there's a thin line between outer space and underwater movies. The Alien movies, you always have, like, they're on a course for something until they get some kind of distress signal that takes them off course into much more danger, and, you know, everything hitting the fan. And that's what happens here. They're going down to the trench to do their research and whatnot. And next thing they know, they find out there's somebody else down there, and everything goes crazy from there. And of course, they encounter undersea creatures and all that stuff. So you've got a lot of that. You also have, that whole middle act of the film here in Meg 2, where it's like survival on this ship, where if the ship, cracks open or whatever, or if they run out of air, like, they're done for. And again, that speaks to just how similar outer space and underwater, all the dangers of both of those situations are. So yeah, I think you get a lot of Alien here. And I think if you go with the first Meg, you could even, like, throw in the Abyss as, like, a bonus piece that, like, kind of combines with Alien. Same kind of similar vibe there.
Yeah, definitely. Again, the Abyss was something on my list, but actually I'd sort of put it alongside Underwater.
Yeah. I've actually never seen Underwater. I need to watch that.
Again, the leaps of logic that
Sure.
may be missing, but as you'd expect. But all that very deep underwater action, there's a very similar parallel. And I mean, the main difference is that in the Meg you can actually see what's happening, but you get that they've added the light in by magical sea creatures. Fine. Happy.
Lots of
That'll
neon.
do me.
Yeah.
But you still get the same sense, like in underwater, they're very much like they can't tell what's coming at them, and you get that because you get the random beeps from all their monitors and stuff, and it's like there's something coming, we don't know where it is, and you get that panic. And also you get the same thing when he goes out miraculously without any scuba gear or whatever, and he's going in and out of consciousness, and you can sort of see something but not really. And I think they're definitely along the same sort of on the same level when it comes to that sort of atmosphere to it, which I thought worked really well.
Yeah, I think so too. Absolutely. Since you were talking about the abyss and underwater, I'll throw in another one right here. I'm going with Avatar. Speaking about all that underwaterness and speaking about Cameron, we might as well throw that in there as well. Also specifically to the way I watched this movie with my mom in 4DX and using new technology in a way that works so well. I really think that this movie, obviously, it didn't do that well here in America, so we're not going to see anniversary screenings of this movie. I think my one time at 4DX is the only time I'll ever see it that way. But to say that this movie was made for that experience is such like I can't say it any clearer. Like this movie with Jason Statham on a jet ski, and every time it goes over a wave, and you feel your seat bounce up, and then the water
How wet
splurting and
did
all
you
that.
get? How
Pretty
wet did
damn
you
wet.
get from that?
Honestly, there's so much water. I think they really used all their water budget on this one. Like it was so much water, and then every time, like during that whole extended Die Hard action sequence where he's just kicking everyone's asses, like the sea and the little air bursts every time he would kick somebody in the face. Like, oh my God, did they really make use of 4DX? And 4DX can be like a real gimmicky, like awful way to watch a movie most of the time. I've only done it like 3 or 4 times, and the other times were terrible. I just had a good feeling about this. But wow, is this movie made for it? Did you happen to get to see a 4DX screening?
So I can't do 4DX because I get motion sickness.
I don't blame
And I
you.
have said to them, I was like, do you not have any stationary seats? Like, I'll sit on the floor, just throw a bucket of water at me. I don't care. Um, sadly, no. I did want to see it in 3D. However, my cinema is a lot smaller than it used to be once they reopened. Um, we didn't have any 3D screenings, but you can very much see where the 3D would have been.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh, damn it, I would have been jumping out of my seat right now.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit sad, but yeah,
Yeah.
I can imagine it being absolutely hilarious. So
Super fun time, super fun use of technology, as James Cameron loves to do. I bet he had a fun time watching it that way. But what do you got next?
um well, so we did vaguely mention it, but obviously Jaws.
Sure.
I mean, it's a giant shark film. It's got to be Jaws, hasn't it? But I
Hmm.
particularly just the one scene, and I had to remind myself afterwards because I was like, I'm fairly certain this is like pretty much shot for shot out of one of the one of the films, and it was the shot inside the Meg's mouth out as
Right.
he's chomping on people, and it was so awful, and I loved it. It was just fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, I was every time I went to see it, I laughed my way through that scene. I just thought it was great.
Incredible
Um,
shot. Yeah, it was really well done. I think my mom was telling me also that the biting its way up the dock, which that was also a Jaws callback to. And then
yeah,
DJ, he mentions that I forget what kind of weapon it is, but like he
it's
mentions Jaws
the
2 by
rounds,
name. Yeah.
the
So,
rounds in his gun, poison on
yeah.
the tip. I love it. It's fantastic. I mean, DJ has a wonderful arc in this film anyway.
Yeah.
Like he does what no character ever does, and that is he learned from the last one.
Right,
He was
right.
like, I don't know how to swim, I don't know how to fight, I need to learn these things. So good on DJ for that.
Absolutely.
Um,
I bet that actor had such a blast too. Like he seems like he's having so much fun.
Definitely, definitely. And
Amazing.
actually, the other thing that obviously Jaws related, and I'm, it made me mad in the last Meg film that Pippin, the dog, who obviously, and I was today years old when I learned that the dog in the original movie is called Pippet, not Pippin.
Hmm. Okay.
And I was like, no, like that doesn't sound right. But obviously, that aside, I got the dog, and I was super annoyed that when Suyin is like getting Jonas back to that yacht at the end of the movie, he did not pick up the dog
Right.
from. You let the dog swim all the way to that yacht. You absolute git. So rude. So I was really good it was really good to see Mayan actually rescuing Pippin in
Yes.
this one. So I was relieved.
More people than DJ learned from the first movie. They
Very
learned
true,
you got
very
you
true.
got to save the dog always. So, yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, as long as you're going Jaws, I'm going to go with my last puzzle piece, which is another obvious shark movie, but I have my reason for including it on the list, and that is Deep Blue Sea. Uh,
Ah,
and, and not just because somebody gets eaten at that last minute jump scare, which is very Deep Blue Sea, but especially because of the closing credits song. We had LL Cool J with his Deepest Bluest My Head is Like a Shark's Fin in Deep Blue Sea. And I don't know who the artist, I should have looked it up before we started recording, but there is a straight up recapping the plot, like shark based rap song at the end of Meg 2. And if nothing else proves that this movie knows what it's doing, that is the proof right there. Anyone who thinks this movie was not fun, I think you were just missing it basically, because that proves that they knew what they were up to.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it was that. That is like pretty much the last like full one I've got on my list as well.
Yeah.
Just loads of reasons, but like running around that little sort of compound
Hmm.
underwater, trying to get out, and just all of that, and yeah,
So much
you can
fun.
see it's like it's gone. That bit was really good. We'll steal that bit. I mean, steal
Yeah.
that bit as well.
Yeah. Sure.
So yeah, I really appreciated that. I think it was just yeah, like I
you know
say,
something
knows
i
what
was
it's doing.
Something I was thinking about too, before we wrap this up, is like there's only so many ways, because they're so big, for a shark to kill people. So it's like you kind of run out of it, and you have to do those same things that we've seen in Jaws, we've seen in Deep Blue Sea, maybe The Shallows or something like that. Like, other shark movies, like, and these being even bigger, it almost lessens the amount of things you can see the shark do. Like each time the shark gets bigger, it's like, I guess it's just going to swim up from behind and bite them. Like, what else can it possibly do? So, uh, I think this movie has, this series, I should say, like, as it gets more and more ridiculous, it kind of opens up the door for more creative stuff, and that's part of the reason why I'm so looking forward to a sequel. But let me read down the list of puzzle pieces here, and we'll get into some closing thoughts. We started it off with Jurassic Park and Jurassic World. Then we went to some Fast and Furious, Rush Hour, Piranha 3D, Die Hard, Alien, The Abyss and Underwater, Avatar, Jaws, and Deep Blue Sea. A whole bunch of fun stuff, from creature features to action movies and kind of everything in between there. Do you have any closing thoughts? Anything we didn't quite get to while talking puzzle pieces?
Um, I think we got it pretty well covered. I was thinking
Yeah.
we haven't even mentioned the giant octopus,
Oh
which
yeah.
I mean that poor octopus. I mean he really deserves more credit.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus, a classic to watch.
Sure.
Um, but there were other things, and I was making a list in preparation for this, just going through like this bit, making notes of all the bits I remember, and I'm like, this must be something. If I
Mm.
couldn't think of it off the top of my head, and there is one scene. No, I tell a lie. There are two scenes where I'm like, this must have been in something, and I was racking my brains and I couldn't think of it. Couldn't find it online anywhere. But you've got um the guy on the island that is eating chicken, and we get an uncomfortable close up of him just munching on that bit of chicken. And I was like, this must be from something, otherwise I don't know why it's here. Not a clue.
Hmm.
I can't relay it back to something, and it's bugging me. So if anyone knows, I need to know.
Yeah.
And the other one was Cliff Curtis up in the helicopter where the uncle falls out with the bomb, and you've got the octopus comes out, grabs it, and
Oh
sort of
yeah.
pulls it down. And I was like, that must be in something as well. I mean, like that feels like I've seen it before. And again, there was so many moments in the film that I was like, this has to be from something else. But those
Yeah.
two particularly bugged me that I could not remember or come
Yeah.
up with a film.
Those both seem like something that it's right on the tip of my tongue as well. So if anybody does think of good pieces for that, please write in with those. I just want to throw out there, I actually forgot this one. One other puzzle piece I wanted to bring up, a movie that I love that a lot of people didn't like, but I think goes right along with this is Rampage. The video game adaptation with The Rock, which is so silly. And again, kind of like with Piranha 3D, like it knows what kind of movie it is. But really the reason I wanted to bring Rampage up is because another thing we did not talk about yet is Skylar Samuels, the main villain, the villain of the villain, like the one whose plan it all is, you know? And this woman is so cartoonishly evil. It reminded me so much of the villain from Rampage and how like she'll stop at nothing and she doesn't give a shit if like she unleashes these creatures to do all this destruction as long as she gets what she wants. And again, just having so much fun with this movie. So I want to give a shout out to Skylar Samuels, who is just ridiculous here.
Yeah, in both movies they get taken away by one of the creatures, which I can't believe that is like one of my other top watch films. I can't believe that wasn't on my list either.
Nice. I'm so glad you like that movie because that I have so much fun talking about that one, and I love whenever I can bring it up and remind people that yes, Rampage rules, and everybody else is wrong. Everyone else is wrong about it. So, right on. Well, I think that does it for Meg 2. Emma, is there another movie you watched recently in between all of these rewatches of the Meg that that you want to recommend to our listeners?
No, I know they're not for everyone. I did. Obviously, it's new in cinemas this week in the UK. I don't know about elsewhere, but it was Blue Beetle came out.
Okay, yeah.
And I have had massive superhero fatigue ever since Endgame. Just haven't really been enjoying stuff as much. But this, like DC property that I had not heard of before, I really enjoyed myself. I think it's because it pulls away from all the regular IP and it's a much more unknown cast. You know, there are people in there who you know and recognize. Susan Sarandon's in there, and
George Lopez.
George Lopez, yeah. George Lopez was fantastic. Absolutely adored him in this. But I just thought it was a nice change for what we've been getting recently. And I think that actually like reignited my love of superhero stuff.
Nice.
Which it was going downhill a bit, and then we got Guardians 3 was very good. I was like getting back on the bandwagon, and this has solidified it for the DC side of things. So
that's exciting.
I recommend seeing that one. It's really good.
Awesome. Yeah, we're going through this crazy storm right now, which, by the way, I almost brought up Sharknado as a puzzle piece. And we are having the LA getting hit by a tropical storm, which never happens in like 100 years. That made me think of Sharknado. But once that's all over with in a couple days, I can't wait to get out of the house and go see Blue Beetle. So I'm very excited after hearing how much you loved it. So yeah, awesome. Emma, tell people where they can find you and your blog and everything you do.
Sure. So, my handle is Emma at the Movies, and you can find me on all the socials on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. I've got a Facebook page. My blog is emmaatthemovies.com. And as I said earlier, I started doing Flickering Dreams podcast. So there are links to that in all of my contacts as well.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for doing the show, and maybe we'll get you back for a non-shark related movie one of these days.
Absolutely, but do pen me in for the Meg 3. So
perfect. We're doing it. We're doing it. It's on the schedule already. All right. right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about the Meg 2, The Trench. What you just heard there was some audio from a video I took of my mom enjoying the Meg 2 in 4DX. Normally, I would never take my phone out, but how could I miss that? So I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Thank you to Emma for joining me on that one, and thank you to all you for listening. If you're enjoying what we do here on Piecing It Together, you can, of course, make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and maybe drop a 5-star rating and review. That would be very helpful if you did that. You could also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, join our Facebook group Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, and don't forget, we do have a Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together, as well as Awesome Movie Year, which is another great movie podcast that I produce, and from my music career. Lots of great stuff over there. So check it out. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. And with that said, let's close out the episode with a piece of my music. And what should I go with today? I'm going to go with something off my most recent album, More Content. And this feels like it might fit pretty well with the whole. I don't know. Does it fit well with the Meg? I don't know. Maybe not. I'm going to play it anyway. How about that? It's a track called Signals, and it feels like it'll fit. So let's go with Signals. This is from my most recent album, More Content. I hope you enjoy it, and we'll be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.